Ooh. Hey guys, let me clear this up real quick. Wipe that real quick. All right, good morning, good morning, good morning, good people. How are you guys? It is Thursday morning and I am up and at it. Been up since 3 o'clock, or I don't know what time I got up this morning, but I wanted to hop on here this morning to talk to you really quickly about why we got to stop focusing on our limitations, our human limitations, and how to tap into God's supernatural power. Okay, so for those of you that don't know, and hey, I'm Nicole Cooper, good morning to all of you. I am in the middle of writing a book and I cannot wait to release this series. Okay, and in the book that I'm writing, one of the things that I do is a prayer over becoming who we were born to become. Okay, praying over our vision, praying over our career paths, praying how to overcome fears, how to overcome traumas, how to begin to tap into the boldness and the power that is within us. Like, I'm talking about all of these things. And in the book, what I talk about, I give insight into that area, right, into that topic, but I also give prayers, give affirmations, and give practical implementation. So today, what today's prayer was and today's topic was that I wrote about was understanding that I am the hands and feet of God. Okay, understanding that God planted you on this earth for such a time as this to do great and mighty things in His power, not your own. And while I was writing this, I was reminded of a little bit of my journey and my story. So here's the thing, because a lot of people, I notice now more than ever, we have probably such a huge, like a crazy amount of hopelessness, right? Where people don't believe in God. People don't know, people who once were believers are now doubting because it's a lot of question marks. The world is questionable. It's so many different circumstances. So a lot of people are wavering. They don't know what to believe in. They don't know who to believe in, right? They don't know where their source is coming from. People feel like there is no God. Like, there's so many questionable things happening right now in our society, right? And what I wrote about was understanding that we as individuals are the hands and feet of God. Okay. And I wrote about the fact that I remember growing up and hearing about God, right? You go to church because your parents, your grandparents, whomever in your family talks about God, and they tell you to go to church. And so you do what they tell you to do. But then you go sit in this church, you see people singing songs, raising hands, talking about a God that it don't apply. You like, I hear y'all talking about this God thing, but y'all talking this Shakespearean language. You hoop and you holler. I don't understand what you're saying. I can't relate. And I don't even know how to apply this to my everyday life. Then the people who I go to church with cuss me out on the way home. So I don't even know if God is real. Like, is this a front? Is this hypocritical? Like, what is this world that we're living in, right? So all of us have had different experiences in this journey of trying to figure out what this God thing is, right? Is God real? Is it a make-believe? Is it a fantasy? Is it brainwashing? What is it? And I remember growing up and going to church and sitting in there for hours and still not understanding, like, what is this? And I had a grandmother that would teach me scriptures, but we had a whole bunch of rules with those scriptures. You can't wear fingernail polish. She was Seventh-day Adventist. You can't wear pants. You can't do nothing from Friday sundown. It was all these can'ts. So to me, God was not yet real. But I remember going to college and having a roommate, a neighbor in my dorm who would slide me notes underneath my door of encouragement, who would constantly just be an angel in our life. And I was like, where did this girl come from? And why is she so nice to us, right? Why is she always so committed to, like, being available? She would bring us gifts and she would just shower us with all this love. Now, coming from South Central LA, where you got to be skeptical about what people are doing, I was like, yo, what's up with this chick? I don't know if I trust her because she a little too nice, right? That was my initial reaction to her. And then I just saw that she was genuinely just genuinely sowing into my life. And she started introducing us to God and writing us inspirational messages and introducing us to scripture. And one day she invited us to go to this event, and it was called Sisterhood. And it was like, they introduced you to who God was, and they introduced you to just how to create a relationship with God. Mind you, I went to college at 17, so I was young, and this was all like new to me, kind of sort of, where I saw kids my age kind of serving God, and I was like, yo, this is kind of dope. Like, what is this, right? Because I was a little street kid, a little thug mo, right? But then I remember transferring from Tuskegee and going to Auburn, and I went from an all-black, college and city to this big old college where I didn't know anybody. And I remember thinking, if I can just find a church, I can get plugged into the city. So I was like, all right. And I remember sitting on the yellow page, going through the yellow pages, trying to look for a church. And now this sounds funny, but I was looking for a black church, right? I remember calling the different churches to see what kind of voice answered the phone. And if it didn't sound like a black voice, I hung up, right? Because I was like, I got to find me a black church. And I don't know how I found this church, but I ended up finding this church called White Street. And I was committed to going to church. And so I went on ahead, and I remember asking them, what time does church start? And I remember thinking, God, I don't have no church clothes. Like, all my stuff was like tight jeans, fitted tops, real hoochie mama stuff. But I just kept hearing, come as you are, come as you are. So I was like, I'm going to go to church. I found out it was like at 9 o'clock, 9:30, whatever it was. I put on my little tight jeans, my little fitted shirt, and I said, I'm going to get to church. So y'all walk into the church. I go to church, and I walk in. Y'all know I'm 6 feet tall. I had heels on. So I walked into this little cramped church with tight jeans on, fitted top. Back then, I was 6 feet tall, probably a size 4, right? Real statuesque, as they would say. And I walk in this church, and all these people looking at me. I'm looking like the clueless random chick that them flew in from the wind, blew me from somewhere. People was looking at me like, who is this, right? But I remember walking into that church, and I was committed to getting something out of it. And that day, it was a guest speaker, which was a college student, a young guy who went to Auburn. And for the first time when he was preaching, I heard a word that I could understand. It was like this guy was speaking my language. It was very practical. It was very simplified. It wasn't deep and spooky. It didn't sound like Shakespeare. He wasn't hooping and hollering. It wasn't excessiveness where it was like, you walk away like, what was that, right? It was real practical. So on the way out, mind you, this is a small little Southern Alabama church. The pastor would always go to the door and greet everybody on the way out, right? So him and the speaker are standing there greeting everybody out. And I was like, I need to talk to you. Y'all know I was real like forward from Cali. And I was like, I need to talk to you, to the guy that was speaking. So I was like, listen, I'm new here. I transferred from Tuskegee. I'm from LA, and I want to build a better relationship with God. Like, is there anything else that I can get plugged into? So he was like, yeah, come on out to a Bible study on Wednesday, right? So I was like, bet, I'll be there. So y'all, I went to that Bible study, and this man became my mentor and forever changed my life. And here's where I'm trying to get with this. This guy became the first Jesus that I ever witnessed. Like the first actual presentation of who God was in the flesh, from a standpoint of like how to apply all these things that we learn in the Bible and what people talk about who God is. He became the first, like, I don't want to say he was the first, but he was like one of the real mentors in my life that showed me how to practically apply the word of God to my life, right? And we ended up building an amazing relationship where he became a mentor for me, and he started teaching me what God looked like in the flesh. And it was so many practical experiences, but I used to always go to him for advice. I would be like, Pat, his name was Patrick Smith, right? I'd be like, Pat, what you think about this? And he'll say, it's not what I think. Let's look at what the word says. And I used to get mad. I'm like, dude, I don't want to know what the Bible say. Like, I want to know what you think. And he would always tell me, Nick, it's not what about I think. It's not what I think. It's what God desires for you. I don't want you to live your life wanting other people to give you answers. I want you to understand how to hear from God for yourself to know what you need to do in your own life. And I didn't understand a lot of those things until, like years and years later. But I remember him saying to me, because we used to always talk about things. I would be, listening to my Tupac, my Biggie Smalls, my Ice Cube, all my stuff, Cali girl, typical Cali girl. And we would talk about music. And I remember him talking about, because I was like, Pat, why, what's wrong with listening to Dr. Dre? What's wrong with listening to Snoop Dogg? What's wrong with listening to Tupac? And I remember him saying, okay, Nick, if you had a black dog and a white dog and you put them in a ring to fight with each other, who would win? And I was like, I don't know. The white dog? I don't know. And he was like, it depends on what you're feeding the dog. He said, if you put the white dog in there famished, haven't eaten in 3 days, and then you put the black dog in there that just finished eating a full steak, get, square two meals a day, get the proper nutrition. He said the black dog, when they get into the ring, is going to dominate the white dog. Why? Because the white dog is famished and weak. The black dog is filled with strength and power and nutrition. He's ready, right? And so I was like, well, what does that mean? He said, whatever you feed yourself is what's going to win. He said, if you listen to music that encourages you to do certain things, when it comes down to you being in a life-based situation, you're going to fall prey. And he used sex for an example, right? Because we're talking about sex and all that stuff. You in college, right? I'm in college. I'm a Cali girl walking across campus of Auburn University. Tons of athletes, right? Every temptation you can ever think to man happens in college. And we used to talk about, how to actually guard yourself, protect yourself from falling prey to the temptations and stuff that was going on. And he was like, if you're listening to music that is just feeding you all this stuff about sex, he said, if you get into an encounter with somebody because sex has been fed into you over and over again, it's going to be real easy to engage into that because you've been feeding your spirit, you've been feeding your spirit, your body, your soul, everything about that music that puts you already in that lustful place, that it's going to be really easy to surrender to sex when it's presented to you because you fed that to you. He said, but if you begin to equip yourself, you remove those things and you equip yourself with things that build you up, it will be a lot easier to deter those things because you fed yourself the alternative. And then another situation happened for me where I was listening to some Tupac, right? And y'all know Tupac's music, all right? So I was listening to some Tupac and I was driving through campus and this cop pulled me over. And me and the cop got into it real bad, right? I went off on the cop. And I started saying all kind of stuff that I shouldn't have said, right? And so the cop turned red and he got offended. Like, it was real bad. But thank God, this was back in the 90s before all this craziness is happening. But me and the cop was going like this, like when he pulled me over, right? Mind you, I had Tupac on. So me and Pat was talking. I had cussed the cop out and I told Pat what was happening. He said, Nick, I want you to think about it. He said, you had Tupac on. What was the spirit of the song that you were listening to when you had that encounter with the cop? Y'all know Pac be like, F everybody, right? I don't know what song I was listening to, but it was like one of those, like, you already in that spirit of like, F all y'all when you're listening to Pac. So when the cop pulled me over, that transference of spirit came from Pac straight out of me into the cop. It was just like this feud. Like, I just had all this anger and this fire coming out of me at this cop, and we going at it, and I'm like, F you, and I'm just, right, like, y'all, I was crazy back in the day, about 19, 20 years old. And I remember running into the cop later on, and I had called him like a racist and all this stuff, and he had turned red. And I remember seeing him at a basketball game. He walked up to me. He remembered me, right? He was a campus cop, and he was like, I just want to apologize. I'm not racist. I want you to know that I was just doing my job, blah, blah, blah. And I had to apologize to him. Thank God back then it was different, right? I don't want to say it was different, but we just had that was a different encounter. But I realized that what I was feeding myself was fueling how I lived, how I responded, the energy that I was operating in, and all that stuff. And so Pat began to show me how to begin to operate in a place, in a space of your spiritual power, how to understand who God was in you, how to understand that you are the hands and feet of Christ. Like, you're the hands and feet of God. Everything that we hear about God, y'all, is not just in heaven. It's the ability to be a vessel that God uses to impact and inspire other people. And he wants to operate in and through you, right? So Pat taught me how to get out of this little thug mentality that I had back in the day, right? Where it was me against the world. To no, it's you to be a vessel to impact and inspire the world. God planted you because you are the hands and the feet to inspire. It is not for you to be against everybody. It's for you to be a light to everybody, right? Now, this doesn't mean you go out here and be a people pleaser and do everything to everybody else, but it was understanding that God works through you to be a vessel to impact other people. And so we had to understand, I had to learn how to operate in God's power and not my own power. Why? Because the flesh is weak, right? So if you think about your human limitations, our human brain cannot understand the things of God. See, the Bible tells us in I think it's in Corinthians, one of them, I don't know where it is. I'll figure it out. But it talks about the natural man cannot understand the things of God. They are only spiritually discerned, right? So a lot of people who do not understand the Bible, for many of you guys who don't believe in God, listen, that's fine. I used to be that way. I don't know if I believed in God because a lot of the examples I saw did not represent a kind of God that I was interested in, right? The judgment, the criticism, the endless rules. You can't, right? And so it was all these things. Oh, shoot. My mom is texting me. I got to check on something. Y'all, I'm going to come back and do a part 2, but she needs me. I'm going to explain this in a part 2. Come back in a second, but I got to answer her call.